any smart engineer or like founder knows like there are certain things where it's like what you see at the surface level is just a tiny fraction of what you're actually getting. And so with, enough intuition, there are certain things where like you'll never attempt to, to build this. Like we're not going to go and implement payments tomorrow morning. Like every time I see those like 3 or 4% that like Stripe takes, I'm like, like this sucks. But I promise you it will be a lot more expensive to do this. Our time is better spent on doing the one thing that's very hard, the sort of incompressible, compounding advantage.
Welcome to How I Grew This, where we dive into the world of digital marketing and connect with leaders in the space about how they're scaling, evolving, and growing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to How I Grew This. We have an awesome guest today. His name is Sy Bohy. He's the founder and CEO of Seam, which is a software company that allows you to control any IoT device using a single API. So we'll dig into what that means together. Adam calls it Stripe for the physical world of connected devices. Speaking of Adam, you and Sy go way back. How do you guys know each other?
That's funny. I was thinking about that before. How long's it been? 10 plus years?
Oh, at least.
Yeah. So we share a co-founder is how we know each other, right? Anaya. Mm-hmm. We both had the same CTO over different companies. And Sy, your first company was what, 2 years out of school? Is that you founded a company 2 years out of school, a year out of school?
Yeah. Some more or less like a year out, a couple of years out. Yeah.
So you went to Stanford, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Went to Stanford and then graduated and you're like straight to Nest?
Yeah. So I joined Nest when it was still a pretty small company. So Nest, the thermostat.
The Nest that I know, my thermostat. Okay. Wow.
So I basically Nest at the time was a really, really special place. It was effectively all the people who had brought you the iPhone and then the iPod before that. So kind of like this core Apple crew. They had decided to start Nest on the back of a handful of insights. One of them is basically when they made the iPod and the iPhone, they basically figure out how to shrink computing components so that they could effectively fit in your pocket, right? So we went from a desktop, laptop, and then basically, an iPod and an iPhone.
Silicon Valley compression vibes.
Well, you've heard the story about Steve Jobs dropping an iPhone in his aquarium?
I have not heard about that one, no.
Oh, this was so they brought it to him and he goes, it needs to be small. And they're like, it's as small as it possibly can go. So he took it over to his aquarium, dropped it in the aquarium, and bubbles started to come out of it. He goes, there's air in there. It can be smaller.
Oh, God.
Oh, my gosh. No air allowed.
Yeah. That sounds like a thing he would probably do. But yeah, so like the crew that started Nest, they shrank the components. And then by virtue of shipping 1 billion plus mobile device by, 2009 or so, the cost of those components had also drastically come down. And sort of the convergence of these two things was, well, computing is going to get embedded into everyday object. Anything from your thermostat, your sensors, your cameras, your whatever, because the computing is super cheap and it's also very, very small form factor. And as a result of this, we're going to have effectively computing deployed inside of our homes, our buildings, our cities, the world at large. And now software is going to be able to start interacting and with the physical world and coordinate the use of those devices and read some of the data coming back and so forth. And I think if you look at like sort of kind of that point in time when I joined them in 2012, they were just getting started, but they basically kind of nailed it. I think, hardware, smart home devices got completely commoditized. We went from having maybe a couple of like connected devices inside of our home in like 2010 to I think now like the average American owns like, a dozen or so. It's kind of crazy. And that's not stopping, right? It's just continuing to go. Like the hardware continues to get more and more, cheaper and available. And, so it's only sort of fitting that like the people that kind of kicked off the mobile revolutions were also the ones that kind of kicked off the smart home revolution.
What was your connection to those people? Did you kind of know some of them ahead of time, or was it just like you landed in an interview process with people that you found impressive and latched on?
Yeah, I'll talk real quick about the interview process of Nest because it's very comical. I had a very good friend who had worked with Matt and Tony at Apple on the iPod team and then the iPhone team, and when I was sort of kind of as with every graduate that's coming out of college, you got to start looking at that job and so forth. And he said, "Oh, you should go talk to them. I can't really tell you what they're up to. They're very secretive, but you should go talk to them." And so I went and I interviewed and I was really just going to do an internship, over the course of the summer because I wanted to go back and do a PhD at Stanford. And they made me an offer. And at the time I was looking at different things. I was potentially also looking at full-time jobs. And the funny thing about Nest is that at the time, when I was looking at jobs at, the Googles and whatever of the world, like the offer was sort of a 6-figure like salary coming out of school. I mean, it was kind of like what you got paid as a computer science like grad. And then the Nest offer was somewhere like $39,000 a year, like basically barely minimum wage. And I remember but I remember like looking at the offer letter and be like, "How did you guys like forget a 1, in front of it? Maybe like a 0 ideally at the end, And they were like, no, that's our offer and you're going to take it." And I remember, they had a very specific point of view on things, but I had a wonderful professor in school that, it was a security computer science professor, but he basically sort of gave this advice of like, hey, when you're going to graduate and come out of this school, this institution, like you're going to get job offers basically thrown in your face with an insane amount of money to go work at these big companies, and don't take those jobs. Those jobs will still be available when you're 40 and you have a mortgage and 3 kids and, a car payment. And when you actually need the money, like those jobs will still be available. What you should do early on is take as much risk as possible, calculated risk, well thought through, because right now you have a lot of financial freedom. And so for me, I was kind of like putting that Nest offer in perspective. It's like, well, I can take this very nice offer from one of the big tech companies, or I can go and, go work at Nest, get paid not very much money, but basically I get to touch the third rail and learn a ton. And the people there were incredible. And so I think in the end, like the money figures itself out, but the decision to join them was the right one.
So you come back to IoT, which we'll get to, but the natural evolution from starting at a super high-tech startup that's inventing IoT devices for the real world is to go off and start your own company in automotive marketplaces.
Yeah.
So how did you get to InstaMotor from working as an engineer for Nest? How did you found a company after that?
I've always like wanted to start businesses. I would say like, joining Nest and working there was almost kind of a fluke for me. And being a founder is like kind of what I always wanted to do. I think, at the time our good friend, Val and I had seen kind of an opportunity and was like, "Oh, cool. Like we can sort of chase that down." I think what happened in retrospect is like, that company was hard. It wasn't like super near and dear to my heart. I love working with the crew there. That was amazing. But I think like coming out on the other side of it with all the challenge and stuff, I was like, okay, when you start a business, like a product market fit is important. The other thing that's very important is like founder problem fit, meaning like this is something I truly want to work on every single day. And I think that, this startup that we did wasn't, 4 or 5 years, like I learned a ton. It was wonderful, but it's not with a little bit more maturity. I think I would have maybe taken a different path. And I think like coming back to Seam, post InstaMotor, I took like a 1.5 years off, like to just kind of think very carefully about what's important to work on, what kind of gets you to, wake up every day and come in and be excited. And I think for me, it was like, there was still this interest of like computing is getting deployed into the real world. The Nest vision sort of happened. Hardware is absolutely everywhere. The one thing that didn't really happen yet is software is not truly coordinating the physical world, right? Like a lot of things are still kind of dumb. And that's really because software has a hard time connecting to devices. And so we sort of saw like an opportunity to go and complete the story of Nest, of saying like, well, I think we need to find a way to make devices very easy to interact with for software, for AI agents, et cetera. In the same way that software today can process payments with Stripe, can send SMS with Twilio, so on and so forth. And so for me, like this is a very, this is something that's intellectually very interesting to go after. And this is something like I'm excited to wake up for every single day. The Seam is not going to be a quick grow it and sell it. I think it's been really intellectually like interesting to come in every day. And yeah, so that's basically like how I eventually like sort of found like kind of found my way, like the soul of like what I wanted to work on.
So Amanda's introduction was my words, but what does Seam do in your words?
So basically, we provide a single API/platform to control just about any device that you can find. So there's at the hardware layer, like when you look at door locks, thermostats, sensors, cameras, there's enormous fragmentation of device and brands and so forth. There are thousands of different brands and obviously tens of thousands of different models. I like to think of like devices a little bit like galaxies, like we discover new ones, every single day. And none of these things are standardized in terms of like how you can talk to them, in terms of the APIs, the protocols. And so it's pretty difficult to integrate. And on top of that, like manufacturers like can be a little bit cagey about granting access to their device for good reasons, right? Like there are security implications to some of this.
Right, secured cameras, right. You don't want anyone accessing that.
Yeah, or door locks, right? Like you want to be careful about, who can come into a physical space. And so what we saw when we started is we had a number of friends that were creating software applications, and they were like, hey, like as part of this workflow that I enable with my SaaS or whatnot, I need to grant access to your house, or I need to help this building sort of save energy or adjust, the usage of energy depending on like the cost of electricity at a given point in time. And every single one of these people were struggling to get access to device APIs that may exist. They were struggling to integrate them. They were struggling to make them reliable even after successfully integrating them. And so we kind of came in and we said, well, IoT devices are going to continue to be sort of a growing force. We're shipping. I think right now we're shipping somewhere on the order of like 2 or 3 billion connected devices per year, like in the real world, beyond just smartphone and computers, like just connected hardware, like 2 to 3 billion devices every single year.
Just thermostats, so that's going to door locks, like vacuum cleaners, refrigerators,
everything. Yeah. And some of them are kind of dumb, right? Like it's like, do you really need your toothbrush to be connected? Like could see like some
but
use
like
cases.
Timers for like 2 minutes is up and it's tracking and you probably get a streak. I've never used one of these, but
yeah, I have like the Oral-B whatever, and I don't think I've ever turned on the Bluetooth connectivity. But like conceptually, like it is the thing that's not going to change is like the world is going to continue to deploy a bunch of these devices, and the other thing that's not going to change is the world is going to continue to build more and more software for very specific use cases, and these two things should be talking to each other. And every time in Silicon Valley, like every time we've seen effectively an important piece of infrastructure that software developers wanted to get access to, banking, payments, telecommunication, et cetera, we've had an API company or a platform company come about and effectively democratize access to that piece of infrastructure,
Stripe,
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So Stripe for payment, Plaid for banking, Twilio for telecommunication. I mean, the Checker for background checks, like the list goes on. And so Seam is just like, it's kind of like the latest chapter or like an iteration of this. It's like enormous volume of devices being deployed, more and more businesses, prosumers, et cetera, adopting them. Every single one of these businesses at this point in time, like effectively has a software stack of some kind. They're using some off-the-shelf application, whatnot. And so they're going to want to see more and more automation of the physical world, granting access, saving energy, and so on. And we're effectively going to be in the middle, kind of like enabling these things to talk to each other.
So when you set out and you said, hey, this problem exists, who were you really thinking you were going to be solving that for primarily? And I'm curious if that's evolved over time.
For us, like we've always been like maybe a little bit stubborn about we're building the API to the physical world. And so the moment you say API, like, well, clearly you're talking to a very technical customer, the developer. I think to this day, this is still true. That this is still kind of what we're going after. We did have a couple of like iterations where we try to see like, hey, can we go after like non-technical buyers? And I think we've had a harder time sort of conveying the same level of excitement for building to that audience versus like kind of building for developers and kind of like doing something that's kind of like Stripe-like. What's been super interesting is with all the AI coding agents and all the stuff that we've seen kind of like the last like couple of years, it has been a huge tailwind for us. We think if you look last year, we've 5 or 10x the number of API keys that get created every week. Like we see everybody and their mother kind of like coding some application. A lot of people are vibe coding. I don't know how successful they'll be, but like it is there. Like everybody is a developer now. It's super exciting because now I sort of see us as being in a nexus of like something very important happening, and we're trying to run as fast as we can to make sure that like our platform is complete. It supports every device you need. You can run very complex workflows off of it for whatever application you might be building or workflow you might be running.
It's funny. I heard yesterday that GitHub finally hit the 1 billion commit per year threshold. And this year, they're supposed to hit 5 billion. So exactly like you said, they're increasing the amount of code commits by 5x in 1 year. You're seeing that same amount. So you're saying is AI is democratizing programmatic access for your own devices. So like, what is an example of what you call them a prosumer, but like, what is an example of what that person is doing?
Yeah, so internally, we kind of refer to prosumer. So I think in the world of connected hardware, like devices and so forth, there's sort of like devices that are intended for consumers, and then there's devices or systems that are intended for like enterprise use cases. So the most basic example is like, I think you can walk into a Home Depot and you can basically buy a smart lock. And so that would be a consumer device. But if you're running a hotel or a big building or something, you're obviously not going to go to Home Depot. You're going to go talk to an access control. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more intense. But prosumers are interesting because we're seeing more and more very small SMBs that are purchasing consumer grade hardware devices, but are using them for business use cases. The most basic example is Airbnbs. Airbnbs are, for all intents and purposes, businesses. They gross a few $100,000 a year, depending on the size of the portfolio. And these people are deploying consumer-grade devices inside their home, but they're deploying them for the purpose of making their Airbnb operations more efficient, right? Granting access to guests, turning on the heat or the AC, adjusting the temperature of the pool, so on and so forth. And so prosumers for us are kind of like these people that operate businesses of various kinds of sizes, but ultimately they're deploying what are fundamentally consumer grade devices. And that's a very new thing that's been happening in the last like five years or so.
So you'll see someone vibe code their Airbnb dashboard to control their 3 houses they own in Austin to, ramp up the temperature for people that arrive and make sure AC isn't pumping when people leave. So they're doing that themselves.
Yeah, so we definitely didn't see that like a year ago. Like historically, there's an ecosystem of software applications like SaaS vendors that sell software for managing your Airbnb, your hotel, your apartment buildings, and so on. But what's really changed in like the last really 6 months or so is now we're obviously seeing these applications still like coding these workflows on behalf of their customers, but we're also seeing like basically operators that are running Airbnbs or apartment buildings effectively coding their own applications to do all the things that you just mentioned.
So that is a small business or medium-sized business using AI to basically automate their own internal business problems. Now, that's actually very neat bridge to another thing that we talk about often, but I want to introduce to our viewers and to Amanda. You're doing that for your own company right now, specifically your CRM system. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's a very interesting parallel.
Yeah, I think we all know about like the SaaS apocalypse. I don't know how overstated it might be, but I do think the age of personalized software is upon us. I think it's exponentially easier to create the software that matches, that is basically fully tailored to your exact needs. And For Seam specifically, like we're really like now running a ground game of creating like basically our own internal tools. So 2 years ago, like building a CRM from scratch, that's just crazy. Like you don't do that. You go buy HubSpot, you go Salesforce if you have to, etc. But we saw that with all this agentic workflows that are now available, that we can basically run on our own data and customers and so forth, a lot of the off-the-shelf CRMs kind of get in the way of enabling these agents to operate across our operational stack.
By design, or just they're not flexible enough?
They're not flexible enough. I mean, they'll have like, HubSpot is a great product, so I want to be a little bit careful not to
no slander.
Flag. Yeah, well, it's not slander. It's more like, it's as good as a very, very flexible product. It's very impressive what they've been able to do within the constraints of a UI, like the amount of customization and so forth. But I think like for us, like maybe it's because we're super small, but like the CRM is effectively just a database. And then, the integrations that you used to need with a CRM to like Stripe and things like that, like these are pretty easy to build. And so, the CRM...
if you sacrifice the UI, then you're able to get a lot more flexible, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and like I think agentic workflows, like the data that they needs to be organized, maybe not necessarily completely differently, but like they benefit from having like a very simple like lookup system for like data information about the customers. There's a lot of things you want to flow back into your data store, and so again, like HubSpot and others are great products. It's just like I think for us, when we started working on like, hey, we're going to really run our current sales pipeline through sort of our own agentic, CRM, like leaning back on HubSpot to effectively just use it as a database didn't really make sense for us. And so, it was really about like, let's just build things internally. And again, you can do that now. Like it's not, you don't need like a team of 10 developers to go do it. It's like I'm able to basically push code and make the fixes I need, and again, kind of like tailor the software and the CRM as we need.
So you built your own CRM system, and is it working?
Yeah, what are the pitfalls?
Well, the pitfalls is agents. So we basically have a CRM system where like a couple of like agents that will like sort of run through it and do things with it. And it'll do kind of like the standard like account executive task, like follow up with customers, check in on their usage, just kind of like sort of you want to have a pretty clean playbook for this stuff. So it's like, but technically, like if you're Adam would know, like if you're running a sales team, like generally you want your guys to do like very specific tasks depending on like where the customer is in the pipeline. And so agents are actually pretty good at doing this. The pitfalls is like sometimes the agents won't quite do the right thing. Maybe they'll forget to do something, whatever. And so normally with human beings, you can just walk up to your AE as like, hey, you forgot to do blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, I'll remember. Like it's a very easy corrective step. With agents, you kind of have to get into like a debugging mindset. And it's like, why did it do this? Like, and then it's like you need you need to look at the chain of thought. You need to do the root cause analysis, and then like some of the stuff they struggle on. Like generally, it's a function of like, well, we've never really taught it, or we never created like documents or instructions to like do a particular thing, and then. I think just generally, like, again, you want to have like pretty clear boundaries of like what an agent should do versus not do. Like the agents are like overly eager to answer very deep technical questions that our customers might be asking. And so for that, we're like, no. Like we want, our solution engineering team to basically answer that. We don't want like a just like in the real world, we don't want like a salesperson answering stuff that might not be completely correct.
Right. Interesting. So when looking at that, you're saying, you have a hyper-focused product that you're building internally, and that will eliminate the need for you to buy, license of HubSpot potentially. Is that fundamentally uncovering a risk for your business? Because if I can program my own app, what about programming around Seam, like writing my own APIs?
It's a very legitimate question. And I think what you see in practice, so first of all, getting access to these device manufacturer APIs is non-trivial. Again, like there's a lot of business development that's involved, the manufacturers, IP licensing, legal agreements, et cetera. There's a lot of regulations around IoT as well, especially out of Europe. So you don't just like walk into like, hey, let me go and connect this particular device and, be done in like 5 minutes. It's not that simple. If you do manage to get access, that's really only the beginning of the struggle. I think what comes after is like these devices behave in strange and mysterious ways. Sometimes you tell it to, change the temperature and it doesn't. And it's like, why is it not working? And so you kind of need to have the hardware, like, we have an entire lab here in the office where it's like we just have to test these things and do stuff. And then once you actually run things in production, these devices, again, like will fail for random reasons in the real world. And so there's like a whole operational playbook that is effectively encoded in code. And you can't really develop this playbook to make things reliable. And like, a day, it's, for us, it's basically 4 years of experience and counting. And it's kind of there's a couple of like good articles and essays on the things, the timelines that AI can compress, and then the things that AI cannot compress today. Operational knowledge, playbooks, etc. Like these are the types of things where it's like, unfortunately, there's no shortcut. Like no AI agent is going to be able to tell you about all the edge cases, the unknown unknowns that are out there. It is for you to discover. And in the world of IoT, because you're effectively operating, you're enabling sort of real physical world operations for businesses. If you make mistakes, those mistakes are very expensive, very, very expensive. So that generally it's like, yes, you could potentially do an integration if you could somehow like get the access, through the manufacturers and so forth. The practice is like, it is absolutely not worth your time. And I think what's happening for a lot of SaaS today is everybody is feeling enormous competitive pressure to like kind of keep up the features and so forth. And so whenever I talk to some of our prospective customers and say, oh, we're considering integrating directly or not, whenever it's a founder, I'll tell them like, hey, founder to founder, don't waste your time on this. You need to go be building higher up the stack, higher up the value chain. If you spend this time building these integrations, with IoT devices and so forth, while you're doing this, your competitors are going to be building features that basically will put them ahead. And so you want to be like very cognizant of like where you spend your time.
That's actually really interesting and cognizant with very similar to what Branch does, because Branch with deep linking and measurement, a lot of people could build that in-house, but that's not the hard part. The hard part is all the edge cases, all the fallbacks, all the getting it to 100%.
Yeah.
And so
like
I got to imagine
what level of failure for your links are you comfortable with? Or like in terms of measurement, like are you comfortable having X% in a silo versus like getting that full picture? So these types.
I think any smart engineer or like founder knows like there are certain things where it's like what you see at the surface level is just a tiny fraction of what you're actually getting. And so with, enough intuition, there are certain things where like you'll never attempt to build this. Like we're not going to go and implement payment tomorrow morning. Like every time I see those like 3 or 4% that like Stripe takes, I'm like, this sucks.
I know.
But I promise you it will be a lot more expensive to do this. We use a webhook service, like basically to issue webhooks to our customers whenever like a device action happens. Like we send a webhook to the customer server. We pay a lot of money for this, and we actually just signed like a large server renewal with our provider, and part of us were like, oh, maybe we should just build this internally. And then we're like, no, this is very hard to ensure the SLA and so forth. Like our time is better spent on doing the one thing that's very hard, the sort of incompressible, compounding advantage around sort of building integrations.
As well as the infrastructure optimization you have on making it cheaper for you to actually operate it. So therefore, when someone's paying, and what is the model? Are people paying per device? How does that work?
Yeah, there's I think like every sort of like API company with like enterprise customers, we tend to have like a fairly large number of SKUs, but I think the simplest one is like per device per month, like kind of metered usage. We have some folks that are on like per API call type of setup. There's reason for this. Then we also have per like unit of space, like per building, per home, per room in a hotel. So these tend to be kind of like the three setups we have.
Okay, so I'm kind of dying to ask you about something because I know you probably think about the future of connected devices a lot. And something that's been coming up in our world of Branch with mobile marketers specifically over the last several years is like, what's that next device that I'm going to have to integrate into my customer journey or start to understand contextually alongside connected TV and mobile. Do you have any thoughts around like where you expect that to go? What we've been talking about for years is like, oh, all of a sudden our mobile marketer is going to have to start thinking about their fridge and how that connects to the rest of the journey. Or
I see.
is there some sort of insight you've been thinking about where you feel like it's going to be more a part of like a connected experience that people have and that marketers then somehow want to measure?
I see what you're
I
saying.
see.
Like,
Yeah.
is your car going to be the next big smartphone thing you can't live without
Yeah.
connected, or your energy system? Like I have a Tesla battery system. I love it. It tells me how much I have left, how much solar I'm getting, all this sort of thing. Is there a big
Yeah.
device you think there's a revolution coming?
Yeah. What's the next connected device that marketers should be thinking about?
I don't know if there's like one device, but I think like from a marketing standpoint, like what's going to happen is more like the combination of multiple devices, right? Like I mean, basically at this point, like everything is getting connected. Your battery pack in your home, your freaking water heaters are connected now, right? Like
Well, it's smart too. Like if it knows you leave, it's connected to your calendar. It knows you're leaving for a week. It can ramp the water temperature down, and you'll save a bunch of energy costs. Like that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but I think what's still like basically lacking is like general awareness of what's going on inside of a physical space, or like the coordination of multiple devices in one go. And so I'll bring it back to marketing in a second, but like let's take a look at hospitality. Let's say you're like a large chain. I think like a lot of marketers will basically talk about like the guest journey, the experience, like the touch points that you want to have with your customers. A very important touch point and experience is like when you first enter that room, during a reservation. And today it's like basically like maybe tap a card and you open the door and that's it. And I think what's interesting with like the combination of multiple devices, within like a particular room is, could you walk in and like obviously the temperature of the room is already at kind of like where you prefer it to be. I like it very cold at night. I sleep better. So it's like maybe it like would readjust automatically, but not do that for the next guest. Is the Sonos or the music playing something like a little bit different, that's unique to you? What does the TV say? That sort of stuff, right?
Personalization.
And I think personalization of like the physical space and being able to do it like at scale, right? Like not some like CES, booth that like shows you some cool concept, but like actually operationalize this in the real world and sort of being able to take your sort of personal profile of preferences from one hotel to the next within at least the context of a chain. And so when you think about this from a marketing standpoint, like what should marketers think about? I do think in certain industries, especially ones that are a little bit consumer facing or business traveler facing, really nailing the message around like the personalized experience of the guest journey, the relaxing experience, I think is pretty key. And I think these devices are basically going to like enable some of that stuff to take place. And it's not just gimmicks and like, oh, it's cool, the curtain's open. Like I actually think it can basically improve the travel experience. And so being able to sort of convey that from a marketing standpoint, I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
That's so remarkably similar to what we're seeing today. Is like AI is enabling personalization at scale. And so now it's important for marketers, builders, whatever, to use the data they have in order to be able to make that personalization throughout the journey. So for you, you're like, how do you share that when it's colder, it's better? Well, they look at the thermostat when you're sleeping in the hotel and you have it ramped down to 62. So they know that you like it colder. And so when you walk in, you're like, oh, this place feels more comfortable because it's colder. And they have that from your previous stay.
Yeah. We introduced this maybe about half a year ago. So the concept of a user identity, like a person. And, again, we're an API for devices, but at the end of the day, we're an API for the physical world. And the physical world, it's like, yeah, it's devices, it's physical spaces, and it's people. And so the people part, we basically are going to start pushing the envelope around like, hey, if you help us understand, I have this customer, John Smith, staying at my hotel, and you have this user identity that we're able to track within Seam. Then we can start attaching preferences like, hey, here's the type of music that we should be playing in the Sonos. Here's the temperature, like here's, if you have 8 sleep for your mattress, like here's probably like what they want for the configuration. Here's the Netflix accounts that we need to connect to the TV pre-arrival and obviously remove it.
Wow, how great would that be?
Yeah.
Logged in.
By the way, it's a very common and problem in hotels. Like people forget to log out of their Netflix accounts, and so there's like reset setups now. But it's annoying having to log in the first place. And
we have QR codes for that flow because it is such an annoying use case that people are like, we gotta get a hold on this. People can't.
Yeah, it's funny how a connected IoT company and a measurement linking company have so much in common for businesses. Looking ahead, Sy, if you were to give advice to founders that are looking to build and not be eclipsed by this personalization of software at scale, what advice would you give yourself and other founders that are or builders that are building for the future?
So I think at this point in time, everybody should be building. Like, it doesn't matter if you're not technical, you should be building. You should be coding, right? Like I push, I'm the CEO, but like I still push like 50, 60 pull requests a day to the various tools that we have. And that's just because like, yeah. But
how much of your time are you actually spending on that, percentage-wise?
Well, as you know, I love building, so I think for me, it's like every
count.
working hours. Yeah. It's like I don't have a job. I just come into work like to play. Basically, like it's I'm having a ton of fun. But
he is, by the way, the hardest working guy I know. Like his normal working schedule is like 18-hour days. That's normal.
When
He's
you do
bonkers.
what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's hard to call it work when like, you get this dopamine drip constantly from like the things you can do. But no, at the end of the day, like I think when you think about starting a business, so you should absolutely be building constantly. It doesn't matter if you're a public company CEO or like a founder like in your own garage, like you should be building constantly. I think Paul Graham had this really great tweet recently that said the only thing that's worse than CEO that's a little bit too deep in the AI building vibe coding stuff is a CEO who isn't. So you need to be like kind of touching the metal, if you will.
Yeah.
I think moats, defensibility, what's valuable versus not valuable, those questions become pretty important early on, right? Like you can sort of see like the arc of like where things are going, and so you need to think carefully about what makes your this little company project that you're doing, like what makes it defensible and durable. That's very important in the age of AI because basically anybody on the planet can compete with you very quickly, and the most important thing continues to be distribution, marketing and distribution. I think that becomes more and more important than ever. Yeah, it's super, super important. I think having like we'll call it like some kind of unfair advantage in that lane is probably one of the most important thing at this point. And I don't know if like the rules have fundamentally changed from say like 2 or 3 years ago. That was already kind of like one of the most important thing, but now it's like you need to be very, very good at this.
That's good
truly,
advice.
This is a theme that keeps coming up, and I think it's great advice. Last question I'll ask is just what excites you most about the future of connected devices?
Yeah, or the future in general. So connected devices, I do think we're getting closer and closer to like sort of writing that final chapter of the Nest vision. So again, kind of like computing is going to get deployed at scale throughout the world, and software is going to be able to control and coordinate the use of those devices and basically make the world more thoughtful. So again, it's sort of the Nest vision. Like I think part 1 definitely happened. Part 2, where like software of any kind, AI, etc., that being able to coordinate the physical world and the devices that are in the physical world, I don't think that really has taken place at scale yet. We're getting there. So I think that's going to be pretty exciting, and you're going to see entire buildings, entire homes, entire businesses effectively run completely autonomously. It'll be less energy wasted, more thoughtful experience, a more fair and just world, right? I think what's interesting about the future, just more broadly, is the timeline is about to accelerate a lot. And I think we're going to enter like a golden age of science and discovery. And so I think there's a lot of things to go do in those verticals, if that's interesting to people. I think all the progress that at least I saw over my lifetime, we got some pretty cool stuff like in the last like 10, 15 years, right? We got reusable rockets, electric cars, iPhones. That's probably not going to be very much in comparison to what's coming. Like, I think we're going to have some very interesting discoveries and advancement in the next couple of decades.
I love it. We've got a software CEO who's very bullish and optimistic on AI in the future.
Yeah, of course.
I love the optimism. You're painting a beautiful future. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I enjoyed getting to know you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today.
Thank you, Sy. It was great talking.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Till next time. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please leave a review wherever you listen to this and share with someone trying to grow their career or their business. Until next time, keep growing.